The Academy always felt safe. It was the largest human training center on the distant colony of HFY 9, a place built to raise children, teach science, and prepare young cadets for a future among the stars. Every corridor was bright, every classroom full of voices, and every dorm filled with laughter. The Academy was a home, not a battlefield. That is why no one expected the danger that came without warning. On a quiet morning, a young girl named Lyra walked through the big metal hallway on her way to a lesson. She looked small inside the huge structure, her soft, alien-like features glowing under the bright lights. Lyra did not belong to any known human planet. She had arrived as a rescued refugee months ago, and the Academy had adopted her like family. Her hair always fell over her eyes, her smile always gentle, and everyone cared for her because she carried sadness inside her heart. She never spoke much, but when she did, her voice felt warm. Lyra held her small training pad tightly as she walked, trying not to bump into seniors rushing past her. Everything felt normal. Everything felt peaceful. No one saw the danger coming. Far above the Academy, hidden by the thick storm clouds of HFY 9, a silent shape hovered in the sky. It was long, dark, and covered in spikes. It carried no human signals, no friendly tags, no warnings. It simply waited, like a predator ready to strike. Inside that ship sat a group known across the galaxy as the Karen Marauders, raiders who attacked weak colonies, stole children, and destroyed anything standing in their way. They had been watching the Academy for 3 days. Now they were ready. As Lyra reached the center hall, she felt something strange. The air seemed too quiet. The lights flickered for a moment as if the power grid hesitated. She stopped walking and looked around. Adults spoke softly in corners, checking their devices. A few cadets whispered nervously. Something was wrong. But before Lyra could think about it, a sharp alarm echoed through the building, shaking every wall. It was the one alarm they hoped never to hear. The Academy lockdown alert. Red lights flashed everywhere. Metal doors began to seal automatically. Teachers rushed to gather children. Security drones activated and hovered above the halls. People yelled instructions, but there was too much noise. Lyra froze, unable to understand. Her small heart beat fast. She looked around, searching for someone familiar, but everyone moved too quickly. The hall filled with echoing feet, shouts, and fear. Then the first explosion hit. The entire building shook with a deafening roar. A ball of fire blew through one of the outer walls, sending smoke, sparks, and metal pieces across the hall. Students screamed and ran for shelter. The ceiling lights flickered violently. The second explosion followed only seconds later, even closer. Alarms wailed louder, drowning out every voice. The Karen Marauders had begun their attack. Outside, enemy ships dropped armored warriors onto the Academy grounds. They moved with heavy steps, smashing through doors and walls. Their weapons glowed red with energy pulses. Their mission was simple: capture the young, destroy the rest, and take control of the entire colony. Inside the chaos, Lyra covered her ears as cries and blasts filled the air. She tried to run but stumbled, falling hard on the cold floor. Her training pad slipped from her hands and slid away. She crawled, shaking, trying to reach it, but a loud crash behind her made her scream. A metal beam fell from the ceiling, hitting the ground only inches from her. Dust rose around her. She coughed and crawled backward, tears filling her eyes. She was alone, and that was when something moved behind her. A small shadow crawled out from a broken ventilation shaft. It was low to the ground, compact, and covered in thick fur. It growled softly as it approached Lyra, but not at her. Its eyes did not show aggression. They showed awareness, intelligence, and an almost frightening confidence. It was the Academy's trained honey badger, known by the cadets as Ember. Everyone knew Ember was fearless. Some said he could survive anything. Others joked that he was not an animal but a tiny warrior with fur. But no one expected what he would become on this day. Lyra sniffled and wiped her tears as Ember stepped beside her. The honey badger stood firm, baring its sharp teeth toward the direction of the explosion. Its body remained low but ready, like it sensed every threat in the building. Lyra whispered his name, her voice shaking. Ember made a soft, rumbling sound, staying close to her. He did not run. He did not hide. He simply stood between her and the danger. Another explosion shook the hall, sending more dust raining down. Through the smoke, 3 armored marauders entered the corridor. Their helmets glowed red, their steps loud on the metal floor. One of them pointed at Lyra, the others raised their weapons. Lyra cried out in fear, covering her face. Ember did not move, instead his fur bristled, his muscles tightened. His growl deepened into a dangerous snarl unlike anything the Academy had ever heard from him before. Something old and primal woke inside him, something wild, something furious, something protective. When one marauder stepped closer, Ember leaped forward with incredible speed. He moved like a living streak of fury. The soldiers did not expect an attack from a small creature. They reacted too slowly. Ember landed on the nearest one, claws digging into armor joints, teeth biting down with shocking power. Sparks flew as metal bent. The marauder roared in pain, swaying and falling hard. The other two tried to shoot, but Ember moved too fast, darting between them, jumping onto their legs, biting into vulnerable spots, and tearing through armor plates. The corridor filled with the sound of growls, metal breaking, and shocked screams. Lyra watched with wide, tearful eyes as Ember fought for her. His body looked small, but his rage looked endless. Each attack was faster and stronger than the last, as if her cry had awakened something inside him that refused to let any harm touch her. When all three marauders collapsed to the ground, Ember stood on top of them, chest rising and falling, eyes burning with fierce light. Smoke curled around him, and red alarm lights flashed across his fur. Lyra crawled toward him slowly, still frightened but in awe. Ember looked back at her and walked gently to her side again, nudging her leg. She touched his head with trembling hands. He growled softly, but this time it was not anger, it was promise. The Academy was under siege, danger filled every hall, but Lyra was not alone, she had a protector. And his fury had only begun to rise. Smoke drifted slowly through the ruined corridor, making the air feel thick and heavy. The walls were cracked, the lights flickered weakly, and broken screens sparked from damaged wiring. The Academy no longer looked like a place of learning. It looked like a battlefield. Lyra hugged her knees as she sat beside Ember, trying to steady her breathing. She felt small, lost, and scared, but the honey badger's presence gave her a little strength. His fur was dusty, and drops of enemy armor oil stained his claws, but he remained alert, ears twitching at every distant noise. Lyra whispered softly, asking if they could escape, but Ember only looked forward, keeping watch. She understood then that he did not know the way either. The building was too large, the attack too sudden, and the enemies too many. Even so, she felt safer beside him than anywhere else. Ember moved closer and gently nudged her arm, telling her to stand up. Far down the corridor, a loud thud echoed. The lights flickered again. Lyra grabbed Ember's fur for comfort, but he stepped forward, putting himself between her and the sound. The thud came again, followed by a muffled metallic crash. Lyra's small hands shook. Ember growled quietly, warning whatever was coming. A door at the end of the hall suddenly bent inward. Something powerful was hitting it from the other side. Lyra gasped and stepped back quickly. Ember braced himself, lowering his body like a tiny warrior preparing for war. The door bent more, metal groaning in pain. Lyra held her breath. The door finally burst open. But instead of an enemy, a familiar figure stumbled through, Commander Hale, one of the Academy's senior officers. His uniform was torn, dust covered his face, and he limped heavily, but he was alive. Behind him came two more guards, coughing from smoke. Lyra almost cried in relief. She ran toward them, but Ember rushed ahead, growling with suspicion. Commander Hale froze, recognizing the honey badger's furious stance. He raised his hand slowly. "It's me," he said in a strained voice. "I'm human, I'm a friend." Ember sniffed the air, then lowered his guard slightly. Lyra hurried to the commander, clinging to him. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered that he was glad she was safe. Then he looked at the fallen marauders. His eyes widened at the sight. "Did Ember do this?" Lyra nodded. Ember sat proudly like he understood the praise. The guards exchanged stunned looks. No one expected a creature his size to fight armed warriors. Commander Hale kneeled in front of Ember and whispered thanks. Ember simply blinked, as if saying there was no time for gratitude. Commander Hale stood up again, breathing heavily. "We need to move. The marauders destroyed the central defense lines. The Academy's auto turrets are offline and communications are dead. They plan to capture the children for ransom." "We cannot let that happen." Lyra asked if there were other survivors. Hale nodded slowly. "Yes, many are hiding in the south wing, but we must reach them. The marauders are searching room by room." A heavy explosion shook the floor under their feet. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lyra jumped and grabbed Hale's arm. Ember growled toward the vibration. "That came from the West Labs," one guard said breathlessly. Hale nodded. "It means they broke through another line." Another explosion followed, this one closer. Ember's fur rose. "We move now," Hale ordered. The group began walking carefully down the damaged hallway. Ember stayed at the front, leading them like a living shield. Lyra stayed close behind him, touching the back of his fur whenever she felt too scared. The guards followed with their weapons raised. As they passed through the academy, they saw things that made Lyra's heart ache. Broken training robots lay scattered across the ground. The cafeteria was destroyed. Hallway plants were burned. Classrooms were quiet and empty. Everything looked ruined. Lyra remembered laughing with children there. Now it felt like a ghost building. Suddenly, Ember froze. He lifted his nose and sniffed. His muscles tightened. Lyra felt her heartbeat jump. Commander Hale signaled everyone to stop. The sound of clicking metal echoed from the next hall. Heavy footsteps. The marauders were close, too close. The guards aimed their rifles. Hale pushed Lyra behind him. Ember moved forward, ready to attack at any sign of danger. 3 marauders appeared around the corner. They spotted the group instantly. One shouted something in a deep, mechanical voice, and all of them raised their weapons. Lyra screamed. The guards opened fire first. Blaster shots flashed brightly in the smoky corridor. Ember charged forward like a streak of fury. Hale pulled Lyra behind a broken wall panel for cover. Ember jumped straight at the first marauder, slashing across his helmet with razor claws. Sparks burst out as metal chipped. The guard's blaster shot missed wildly, hitting the ceiling. Ember twisted around the second marauder's legs, making him stumble. The last enemy fired at Ember, but he moved quickly, dodging with impossible speed. The guards fought hard, landing several shots, but the marauder's armor was thick. Ember became the key to the fight. He climbed up one soldier's back and bit into the power unit behind the helmet. The armor flickered, and the marauder collapsed. The remaining enemy turned his weapon toward Lyra. Hale tried to shield her, but the marauder was too fast. The moment the shot fired, Ember launched himself across the air like a bolt of lightning. The energy blast hit the wall instead, burning a whole inches away from Lyra. Ember slammed into the marauder's chest, knocking him down. The honey badger tore into the armor's weak points until the soldier stopped moving. When the hallway fell quiet, Lyra's legs gave out. She fell to her knees, shaking. Ember ran to her quickly and pressed against her, letting her hold him tightly. Hale helped her stand and checked for injuries. Luckily, she had none. The guards looked at Ember with a mixture of fear and respect. None of them had ever seen an animal fight like that. Ember wasn't just protecting Lyra, he was fighting like a trained soldier. Hale spoke softly. He's not just defending her, he's responding to her. Her fear is making him stronger. Lyra looked at Ember's fierce eyes and wondered what he truly was. He looked back at her, calm now, but still alert. A distant alarm sounded from the southern wing. Hale's face tensed. The children, the marauders, are breaking into the shelters. Lyra gasped. Ember stood instantly and growled loudly. Hale took a deep breath. We run, we save them, no matter what waits ahead. Lyra grabbed Ember's fur. Ember leaned forward, ready, and they all began to move. The hallway grew narrower as the group moved toward the southern wing. Broken pipes leaked steam, and sparks fell from damaged lights. Every corner felt dangerous. Lyra stayed close behind Ember, her steps small and careful. Ember walked forward with confidence, his eyes scanning everything. Commander Hale checked his weapon, ready for another fight. The guards behind him tried to stay calm, though fear sat on all their faces. They passed several ruined classrooms. Chairs were overturned, screens shattered, and drawings from the children scattered on the ground. Lyra paused when she saw a picture of a bright sun taped to the wall. It reminded her of the day she first arrived at the academy. She remembered the warmth she felt when the teachers welcomed her. She touched the drawing softly before continuing. Ember stayed by her side, watching her with concern. As they moved deeper into the building, the distant sound of blaster fire echoed. Screams followed after it. Commander Hale quickened his pace. Lyra grabbed Ember's fur again and tried not to cry. Every sound made her jump. The academy, once full of laughter, now sounded like a place where hope was slowly fading. They turned a corner and found a collapsed hallway. The ceiling had fallen, blocking the main path to the shelters. Hale cursed under his breath. One guard suggested turning back, but Ember growled sharply, as if saying no. He walked to a gap under the fallen wall, sniffing the air. Hale leaned down and checked. "There's a crawl space," he said. "It leads to the lower corridor. We can reach the shelters through there." The space was small. The adults couldn't crawl through wearing full armor. Hale removed his chest plate and squeezed inside first. The guards did the same. Lyra hesitated, the dark space frightening her. Ember nudged her gently and crawled in first, his small body slipping easily through the tight opening. Lyra took a deep breath and followed. The space was tight and dusty. Metal beams poked out from broken panels. Lyra tried to keep her eyes on Ember's tail to stay calm. The faint red emergency lights flickered in the cracks above them. She whispered that she didn't like dark places, but Ember made a soft, chuffing sound, reassuring her. After several long minutes, they reached the other side. Hale pulled Lyra out carefully, then helped the guards crawl through. They now stood in a lower corridor they had never used before. The walls were older, marked with warning signs. It was clear this part of the academy hadn't been renovated for years. Ember sniffed the air again, his fur bristled. Lyra stepped closer to him. Hale raised his weapon. Something S here. A loud metallic screech echoed from ahead. The group formed a defensive line. Ember crouched low, ready to leap. Lyra hid behind a broken support beam. From the darkness, a strange machine crawled out, one of the Academy's maintenance bots, but twisted and broken. Its arms sparked, one wheel bent, and its voice glitched. The marauders had hacked it. Its eyes glowed red, and its cutting tool spun wildly. The bot charged toward them. Ember sprinted forward, faster than any human. He jumped onto the bot, biting into its wiring. Sparks burst out, lighting the hall. The bot slammed against the wall, trying to shake Ember off. Hale aimed and fired at the bot's power core. The bot jerked, sparks flew, and it crashed to the ground. Ember hopped off and shook the dust from his fur. Lyra ran to him and hugged him tightly. Hale smiled for a brief moment. "Good work," he whispered. But their moment of relief vanished when they heard another sound, the echo of children crying. Lyra's heart dropped. Ember turned toward the sound and ran. Hale ordered everyone to follow. They reached a metal door half-bent from heavy impact. Smoke leaked from the edges. Hale forced it open with help from the guards. Inside, a group of children huddled together in fear. A teacher stood in front of them, holding a broken metal rod as a weapon. When she saw Hale, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank goodness," she whispered. Lyra rushed to the children, some of whom recognized her and cried harder. Ember walked in front of them, sniffing the air to check for danger. The teacher explained that they locked themselves in the small workshop, but marauders tried to force their way in earlier. The door had barely held. Hale checked the room. "We have to move them. This area won't stay safe for long." A little boy tugged on Lyra's sleeve. "Are the bad men coming back?" he asked. Lyra nodded sadly. Ember growled, making the boy step behind her. Lyra knelt down and told him softly that Ember would protect them just like he protected her. The boy nodded, comforted, and held Lyra's hand. The group prepared to leave. Hale organized the guards to form a protective circle around the children. Ember positioned himself at the front again. Lyra walked right behind him, gripping the boy's hand. They left the workshop and moved into the long corridor leading toward the emergency escape lifts. Hale explained that if they reached the lifts, they could descend into the underground bunker system. It was safer than staying in the academy. Lyra felt hopeful for the first time since the attack began. That hope disappeared instantly when an explosion rocked the hallway in front of them. The blast tore open the ceiling, sending fire and smoke into the corridor. Children screamed. Hale covered Lyra and the boy with his arms. Ember snarled loud enough to shake the air. From the smoke, 6 marauders stepped out. They were bigger than the ones earlier. Their armor looked stronger and heavier. Each carried a weapon designed for close combat. Their leader pointed directly at the children. "Take them," he growled. Lyra froze. Ember stepped forward, fur rising, teeth showing, eyes glowing with fierce light. Hale aimed but knew they were outnumbered. The guards whispered quick prayers. The marauders walked forward slowly, confident. Suddenly, the leader lunged. Lyra screamed. And Ember charged. The honey badger moved with incredible speed, faster than any human eye could follow. The first marauder tried to grab him, but Ember twisted midair and latched onto his arm, biting through armor. The soldier cried out and staggered. Hale opened fire, hitting the weak spot Ember exposed. The other marauders rushed in. Ember darted between them, clawing, biting, ripping at weak joints. The corridor exploded with noise, gunfire, metal screeching, children crying. Hale tried to push the children back, but the fight grew too wild. One marauder reached for Lyra. Ember saw him and roared with unbelievable anger. He leaped at the soldier, landing on his helmet and tearing through the visor. Lyra watched in shock. Ember wasn't just fighting. He was defending her like nothing else mattered. The battle wasn't over, but Ember wasn't stopping. Not now. Not ever. The hallway shook as Ember fought the marauders with wild, unstoppable fury. His claws slashed through armor, his teeth tore into weak points, and his movements were so fast that the children could only see flashes of black and white fur. The marauders tried to grab him, but every attempt failed. Ember bit down on a soldier's wrist joint, and the weapon fell to the floor. He leapt onto another, climbing up his armor like a storm of claws. Sparks burst into the air as metal tore. Commander Hale fired carefully, waiting for moments when Ember exposed gaps in the enemy armor. Each shot hit true. The guards followed his lead, aiming only when they had a clear opening. The corridor filled with noise, shouts, gunfire, the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor. Lyra held the small boy close and hid behind a thick metal beam. She watched Ember fight, fear and awe mixing in her chest. She could hardly breathe. Ember was small, but his rage made him look larger than any creature she had ever seen. His eyes glowed with fierce determination every time a marauder reached toward her or the children. One of the marauders swung his heavy blade toward Ember, but the honey badger dodged and leapt at the man's throat. The force of the impact knocked the marauder to the ground. Ember stood on top of him, snarling loudly. It echoed down the corridor like thunder. The last marauder hesitated, unsure whether to attack or run. Ember's growl deepened, and the soldier took one shaky step backward. Hale took the chance and shot him in the leg. The marauder fell, and the guards disarmed him quickly. For a brief moment, silence returned. The children cried softly, shaking. The whole corridor smelled like smoke, burned armor, and cold metal. Ember walked slowly back toward Lyra, his fur lifted, but his eyes softer now. He nudged her leg gently. Lyra dropped to her knees and hugged him tightly, tears running down her face. Ember rested his head against her chest for a moment before pulling away again to keep watch. Hale inspected the children. None of them were hurt. He exhaled in relief but knew they were not safe yet. "We have to move," he said. "More marauders will come. They know where we are now." The teacher gathered the children and whispered for them to stay close. Ember took the lead again, walking slowly, ears pointed forward. Hale and the guards followed, keeping their weapons ready. They headed further down the corridor until they reached an intersection. The signs on the walls were damaged, but Hale still recognized the area. The emergency lifts lay 2 halls away. If they reached them, they could escape down to the underground bunkers. The children would be safe there, but something about the quiet made everyone uneasy. Ember froze suddenly. His fur bristled and he growled low, barely audible. Lyra felt her stomach twist. Hale raised a hand, signaling everyone to stop. "What is it?" a guard whispered. Ember sniffed the air again. His growl deepened. Before anyone could react, a heavy blast door at the far end of the hall fell open. The ground trembled as something large stepped through. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Even the guards took a step back. A marauder brute entered the hallway. He was taller than any soldier they had seen, wearing thick, reinforced armor with glowing red patterns. His helmet had 2 long ridges, and his weapon looked more like a war hammer than a gun. The brute scanned the corridor slowly, then locked eyes on the children. Lyra felt Ember press against her leg protectively. The brute laughed, a deep, distorted sound. "The small ones," he growled, "they are worth much." Hale fired immediately, and the guards followed. Blaster bolts hit the brute's armor, but he barely reacted. He raised his hammer-like weapon and slammed it into the floor. The impact sent a shockwave down the corridor. The guards stumbled, and a few children fell to the ground crying. Ember launched himself forward without hesitation. But the brute was ready. He swung his massive arm and struck Ember midair. The honey badger flew across the hallway and hit the wall hard. Lyra screamed his name and ran toward him, but Hale grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Ember groaned and shook his head, trying to stand, but the hit had stunned him. The brute stepped forward with slow, heavy steps. "You protect the creature," he said mockingly. "It cannot help you now." Lyra felt tears fill her eyes. She wanted to run to Ember to shield him, to beg the brute to stop. But she knew her small body would not save anyone. Ember tried to stand again, his legs shaking, but his eyes burned with the same fierce fire. Even injured, he wanted to fight. The brute lifted his weapon again, aiming toward the group. Hale shouted for the guards to fire. They aimed at the brute's joints, trying to slow him down. The brute roared and swung wildly at one of the guards, knocking him to the ground. The corridor filled with chaos once more. Ember shook off the daze and forced himself to stand. His breath came out rough, but he stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the brute once again. Lyra whispered his name, begging him to stop because she feared he would be hurt again. Ember looked at her, and for a moment his eyes seemed calm, almost gentle, letting her know he was not afraid. Then his fur bristled again. Something changed inside him. It was as if the pain, the fear, and Lyra's desperate cry awakened something deeper. His body tensed, his claws dug into the floor, and his growl grew louder than ever before. The brute noticed and raised his weapon, stepping forward. Ember charged. This time he was faster than before. His movements blurred, like his body had unlocked something hidden. He dodged under the brute's swing, clawed at his leg, and leapt toward the chest plate where the armor looked thickest. The brute tried to swat him away, but Ember dug in, biting through metal layer by layer. The brute roared and slammed into the wall, trying to crush Ember. The air in the hallway was thick with smoke and dust as the brute's body finally grew still. Ember stepped off the defeated giant and limped slightly, the impact of the earlier hit still affecting him. Lyra held him gently, her hands shaking not only from fear but from the shock of seeing him fight with such fearless power. Ember looked up at her with tired but determined eyes. Commander Hale took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The guards checked their weapons, their faces pale from what they had just witnessed. The children stared at Ember with a mixture of fear, admiration, and hope. Hale knew they didn't have time to stand around. More enemies would surely come now that a brute had fallen. "We have to keep moving," Hale said, his voice low but firm. "The emergency lifts are close. If we reach them, we can get everyone to safety." The teacher gathered the children again, whispering for them to stay together. Ember moved ahead despite his injuries, still determined to lead. Lyra walked beside him, one hand resting on his back to steady him. She whispered softly that he needed to be careful. Ember chuffed quietly, as if telling her that danger did not matter as long as she was safe. The group moved forward through the broken hallway. Every sound made them tense. The distant explosions, the echo of crackling fire, the rumble of collapsing walls. The academy felt like it was falling apart piece by piece. The once bright and peaceful building had turned into a maze of destruction. As they turned into a wider corridor, Hale stopped abruptly. The emergency lift doors were in sight, but so were several marauder soldiers standing in front of them. They had set up a temporary barrier using overturned crates and metal panels. One of the soldiers carried a scanner device, checking the lift controls. The others guarded him with heavy rifles, their armor showing the symbol of the marauder raid team. Lyra gasped softly and covered her mouth. Ember stiffened immediately, his fur rising again. Hale cursed under his breath. "They're blocking the only direct path." A guard whispered, "We can't go back. The brute's roar will bring more soldiers behind us." Another added, "If they sabotage the lift, the children will have no way out." The situation felt hopeless, but Ember stepped forward, ready to attack. Lyra held his fur tightly. "Wait, you're hurt," she whispered. Ember growled softly as if saying that pain didn't matter. Hale crouched behind a broken counter and examined the enemy's position. There were 5 soldiers, the lift technician in the back, 2 guards on each side. They had good cover. A direct charge would be risky even for Ember. But children didn't have time for safe choices. Hale whispered to the group, "Stay low, don't move until I say so. Ember, I know you understand me. Do what you can, but stay alive." Ember blinked slowly as if accepting the order. Then something unexpected happened. One of the children began crying. It was a small girl no older than Lyra. She sobbed quietly, terrified by the sight of the marauders. Her voice echoed faintly through the corridor. Ember froze, his body tensed. He turned his head slightly toward the child, listening. Lyra felt his muscles tighten under her hand. The crying grew louder as the girl clung to the teacher, and something inside Ember snapped open again, like a fire being fed fresh oxygen. His growl deepened, his eyes sharpened like burning glass. Lyra stepped back as Ember let out a roar, not a normal honey badger sound, but something powerful, ancient, and frightening. The marauders turned immediately, scanning the corridor. "Something's there," one said. "Switch to thermal," another ordered, but they were too slow. Ember shot forward like a streak of living lightning. The first marauder fired, but Ember was already past him, leaping onto the soldier's chest and knocking him backward over the barricade. He bit into the weak plate near the shoulder joint and sparks exploded. The soldier screamed and collapsed. The others panicked. 2 aimed their rifles, firing wildly into the smoke. Hale and the guards returned fire, hitting one in the leg. Ember used the distraction and attacked the 3rd soldier's leg, pulling him down with shocking force. The soldier swung at him, but Ember dodged and bit into the exposed section behind the knee. Lyra watched with wide eyes. Ember moved faster than he had even against the brute. It was clear now. The sound of a child crying was his trigger. It unlocked something deeper than simple instinct. It was a bond, an unstoppable urge to protect the small and helpless. Another marauder rushed forward with a glowing blade. Ember dodged, climbed up a wall panel, and launched himself from above. He collided with the soldier's helmet, cracking the visor. The soldier stumbled blindly and was hit by Hale's blaster shot. The last guard tried to grab the technician and retreat, but Ember landed in front of them, blocking their escape. The guard hesitated for a single second, and that was enough. Ember leapt, biting into his arm. The guard screamed and dropped his weapon. The technician tried to run, but Hale shot his leg and pinned him down. Within seconds, the corridor fell silent again. Ember stood in front of the lift doors, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His fur was messy, blood and dust clinging to him, but his eyes still burned. Lyra ran to him and hugged him without saying a word. Ember rested his head against her chest, exhausted but still alert. Hale inspected the lift panel. They tried to jam it, but not fully. I can fix this. He worked quickly, rewiring damaged circuits. Sparks flashed as he connected the main power line again. The lift lights flickered, then turned green. It works, Hale said with relief. Everyone inside now. The children hurried into the large lift. The teacher guided them gently. The guard stepped in next, taking defensive positions. Lyra and Ember entered together, standing near the front, but Hale did not step inside yet. Lyra looked back at him. Aren't you coming? Hale shook his head. I have to seal the door behind us and make sure no one follows. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She didn't want to leave him. Hale smiled softly. Don't worry, I'll be right behind you. He pressed the switch. The lift doors began to close. Lyra reached out toward him. Ember growled softly. The building shook again from distant explosions, and the lift started to descend. The lift shook as it descended deep underground. The children clung to the walls, trembling. The teacher whispered gentle words to keep them calm, though her own voice shook with fear. The guards stayed alert, pointing their weapons at the door, just in case the marauders managed to break through. Lyra stood close to Ember, holding on to him like he was her only anchor in the dark chaos. Ember leaned against her leg, breathing slowly but staying awake. His eyes were fixed on the lift doors, watching for danger. Lyra placed her small hand on his head and whispered, You're so brave, thank you. Ember closed his eyes for a moment, enjoying her touch, then raised his head again. As the lift continued downward, Lyra thought about Commander Hale. His promise that he would come after them kept repeating in her mind. But a heavy worry stayed in her heart. She didn't want to imagine him facing more marauders alone. The lift reached the first underground level and stopped with a soft thud. The doors opened slowly to reveal a dimly lit hall. Old metal pipes lined the walls and dust floated in the air. Emergency signs glowed faint blue, guiding them forward. The bunker entrance lay several corridors away. The group stepped out carefully. Ember sniffed the air and led them down the right path. Lyra followed closely, glancing back at the lift every few steps, hoping to see Hale appear. They reached a large steel door with a glowing security panel. Hale had given them access codes earlier, so the guards entered them quickly. The door clicked and slid open, revealing a wide underground chamber filled with emergency supplies, water units, and communication consoles. It was quiet, safe, and strong enough to withstand heavy attacks. The teacher guided the children inside. The guards set up a defensive line near the entrance. Lyra and Ember stepped into the bunker, but Lyra still looked toward the corridor they came from. Hale wasn't there. Her chest tightened again. A deep rumble shook the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. The children screamed. The teacher motioned for them to move further inside. Ember growled and stepped protectively in front of Lyra. The rumble grew louder, then the metal corridor lights flickered and turned red. Footsteps echoed in the distance, heavy, powerful, and many. The marauders had followed. A guard spoke in panic. They traced the lift shaft. They're coming. Another guard shut the bunker door halfway, but the system jammed. Only half the door slid into place, leaving a wide gap. The controls sparked violently. Lyra gasped. Ember growled deeply. The guards tried to force the door closed with their shoulders, but it wouldn't move. The emergency motors were damaged beyond quick repair. The corridor lights flashed again, and the sound of metallic boots grew closer. The teacher hugged the children, shielding them. Lyra stepped backward, pressing against Ember. She whispered, Please don't let them in, please. The first marauder appeared at the far end of the corridor, followed by another and another. Their armor was dark and covered in fresh marks from the battle above. Their weapons glowed red, ready to fire. They marched toward the bunker with slow, confident steps. Lyra trembled. Ember stepped in front of her, his claws clicking against the ground as he lowered into a defensive stance. The guards opened fire, filling the corridor with bright flashes. Some shots hit, making the marauders stumble but not fall. The enemies pushed forward, raising their weapons. Lyra's heart pounded painfully, and then from behind the marauders another figure appeared, Commander Hale. He limped into the light, firing his rifle with one hand. His uniform was torn, his arm bleeding, but his eyes were full of fire. He shouted at the marauders, hitting one with a direct blast that sent sparks flying. Lyra cried out his name. Hale forced his way through the enemies, reloading his weapon even while limping. He fired one shot after another, clearing a path. Ember growled loudly as Hale got closer. The honey badger's body tensed again, sensing Lyra's fear and the danger approaching. The marauders turned toward Hale, surrounding him. He fought, but he was only one man. One soldier struck Hale's weapon away. Another hit him hard in the chest, sending him crashing against the wall. Lyra screamed. Ember roared and bolted forward, but Lyra grabbed his fur instinctively. Hale forced himself to his knees, breathing hard. He looked at Lyra through the half-open bunker door. His voice was weak but determined. "Get them safe." A marauder raised his weapon at Hale. Lyra yelled no. Her voice echoed sharply in the corridor. Ember froze, his eyes widened. And something inside him ignited again, stronger than before, stronger than ever. The sound of Lyra's fear, her desperate cry, awakened the deepest level of his fury. Ember roared so loudly the corridor shook. The marauders stepped back in shock. Ember darted forward with incredible speed, faster than any move he ever made, a blur of claws, fur, and pure rage. He slammed into the nearest marauder, ripping through armor plates. Sparks exploded. Metal bent. Ember jumped to another enemy, crushing the joint between the shoulder and neck. The marauder toppled, screaming. The others tried to fire, but Ember's fury made him unstoppable. He moved like lightning, biting, clawing, tearing through weak points. Hale, barely able to stand, watched in awe as the honey badger fought like a living storm. The corridor filled with the sound of metal cracking, blasters firing, and Ember's furious growls. One by one, the marauders fell. Ember landed the final strike on the last soldier, knocking him into the wall so hard the armor split. Silence followed. Ember stood there, breathing rapidly, his fur burnt in places, his paws bleeding, but his eyes still burning with fierce protectiveness. Lyra ran to Hale first. He leaned against the wall, exhausted. She hugged him tightly, tears falling. Ember walked to Hale and pushed his head under the commander's hand. Hale smiled weakly and patted him. "You saved all of us," he whispered. The teacher opened the bunker door fully once the corridor was clear. The children rushed out, cheering and crying in relief. The guards helped Hale inside. Lyra hugged Ember again, whispering, "You're my hero." Ember rested against her gently, his eyes closing. The bunker door sealed shut at last, locking away the danger. Inside, surrounded by children he saved, Ember finally relaxed.